Hey, welcome back to Maintainer's Garage and Bags. Like the previous video, I showed you my new 2005 C6 Corvette that I purchased. And so what I've done is like every car, you know, I've out of town that I've bought, I had a pre-purchase inspection done. They told me about a couple minor little problems. What they called it wetness, which is basically they're saying, hey, there could be a leak here on the differential, and a couple other minor little things. But what I wanted to do is, I've got a track weekend in a few weeks, and with every car I get, I want to understand it. I want to get a baseline for the fluids. I want to get a baseline for, hey, what are all the things under it, everything. So I threw it up on the quick jack. Excellent thing, by the way. And when I put it up, I checked the wheel bearings, checked the tie rod ends, you know, grabbed each wheel, shook it, make sure it was no play, nothing weird. Then I just rolled under the car and literally just looked. Took a flashlight, looked around, see what I could see, if anything. And, you know, basically start to get a understanding and, again, a connection with this car. So that way, when I'm under there, if I see something that looks different than the last time I was under there, hey, what is that? So I'm going to change the differential fluid, the transmission fluid, the oil, and the power steering fluid, and the brake fluid. And again, there's nothing that says I need to do this. There's, you know, the car I drove 1,000 miles back from Boston, drove great, but I need a new baseline. I need to say, okay, this is when all this stuff was done, so now I can start keeping records, because the car has a lot of records, but it doesn't have a lot of maintenance records. It's got all our Carfax records, and, you know, going into the dealership for service is all it says. So I've got to set a new, you know, thing for myself, so that's what I did. And I'm taking you along with me. All right, so I guess I'll start with the transmission fluid and differential fluid, so I'll show you some of that. So as stated, that's the differential fluid. Right there is the fill line. I'm sorry, not fill line. The fill port. And on the 2005, they were nice enough to partially block the drain line with the leaf spring. And that's the transmission here, and the drain line, get out of there, is right there. I can't see the camera, so hopefully that's a good picture. We'll make sure, do my best. And the fill port is right there. And as you can see on the C5 and the C6 Corvette, the transmission is mounted to the differential down here. So we're going to start draining these fluids and come back to it. Alright, so I got the transmission fluid changed, and I just used good old Royal Purple Synchro Max. You can use whatever fluid floats your boat. But on the differential fluid, I did use the GM spec from, I think, 2008 or 2009. They recently changed it, but the 2008-2009 spec is a fluid with friction modifier built in. Supposedly very good. Tons of people run it, so that's what I ran. Speaking of tools that I'm not talking about, this, on the 2005 only C6 Corvette, the Diff fluid drain is blocked by the leaf spring. So the little ball end of this lovely tool from my favorite tool spot for like $9 for a set, got it out beautifully. Now this is for the brakes. I'm gonna use this to bleed the brakes. What you do is, you can fill this with fluid, and I've been doing this about 9 years. This thing works great. Motive power bleeder, jam up. You can use this and fill this with fluid, or you can leave this empty and just use air to pressurize your master cylinder. Then you just, you know, basically top off your master cylinder, bleed your furthest brake from it, and then when that's good and bled, you close it, bleed the pressure off, open it back up, top it off, and or again, you can be like my buddy Bill, who uses fluid and sometimes leaks out of this fitting. And, you know, brake fluid on paint helps the shine not. So don't be like Bill. Yes, I'm messing with you, Bill, but don't be like Bill. So this thing is jam up. You can bleed your brakes a gazillion ways. I love this way. Makes it a one-man job. And Literally, I can bleed the whole system in under 30 minutes. So that's what I'm getting ready to do. Like I said, I got transmission fluid changed, I got diff fluid changed, I'm going to do the brakes, then I'm going to do the oil, and we'll be right as rain. Alright, so there's the oil pan, and the blue cap is obviously the oil filter, and then that right there is the drain plug for the oil. So we'll just loosen that up, drain the oil, take the filter off, and very crucial step, refill it after you put the plug and filter back on. Okay, so we got the oil changed, filter changed, and what I'm going to do now, before I do the power steering fluid and the clutch fluid, which I forgot to mention earlier, is I'm going to get under the car. And again, track days, let me back up. This is my car now. I want to feel comfortable in it. Again, I drove it home 1,000 miles. There's nothing that made me think there was a problem. I'm verifying. I'm going to put a ratchet, socket, and or a wrench on every nut and bolt I can put my hands on. Why? Especially on the suspension. Why? Because I want to make sure my car's good to go. I want to give myself a warm fuzzy. Is it overkill? Maybe. Now, I have a track weekend in a couple weeks. I'm doing it also for that. That's my normal track prep. I check all the suspension nut and bolts before and after. The reality is there's a whole bunch of people driving around you every day in cars that are not mechanically sound. And, hey, we hope for the best on the street. On the track, you're asking your car to do a lot more. You're trying to push yourself and your car further than you would on the street. Now, it's a much more controlled environment. It is safer, but you don't want to be the person that wipes out somebody else's dream car that they, saved however they got because your car wasn't right. If your wheel bearing fails and you checked it and it was good, stuff happens. Your radiator explodes, stuff happens. Now, you didn't do a good job looking your car over, the shop that you asked to look at your car didn't do a good job. If it's a shop, you can only do so much. If you can, go there and watch them do it. If you don't feel comfortable, watch them, and all you're doing is, it's a second set of eyes. I've taken my car to shops as well to have them look at it in case I miss something. You just want to do your best, because again, this is a pretty aggressive situation that your car is not normally in, and especially you're talking about if you could do 4 to 5 20-minute sessions on Saturday, then the same 4 to 5 20 again on Sunday. That's a lot of freaking time. It's a lot of abuse. You want to make sure take care of your car so your car can take care of you. So I'll get a little camera and we'll go in there and I'll just point to some stuff. Alright, and in general, I don't know the C6, but I'm hoping the C6 shares a lot of stuff with the C5. You can do most of this in the C5 with a 13, I think it's a 13, 14, 15, and 18. And that's basically what I got under here. And, sway bar bolts, suspension bolts, the steering rack. I mean, you can look at the belts, and again, and you're just checking all this. All you want to do is just say, hey, is this okay? And this is when you can get a good chance to look at the back of the brake rotor and the underside of the suspension and this cradle bolt. Again, this is your car. It's your life. And you want to, I think, I want to do the best I can to keep myself safe. And to me, it's too easy not to do, if that makes any sense. Okay, so here we are on the rear wheel. Front wheel similar. I mean, you got a bolt there. You got, big dummy. You got a bolt there. 2 bolts there. Another bolt there. Your upper tie rod. I'm sorry. Your upper ball joint. Your, you idiot. Your tie rod. And then down there is your lower ball joint. And obviously your sway bar connection. And, you know, doesn't hurt to check the brake caliper as well. Again, you're just putting a wrench on this or a socket and making sure it's tight. These all have torque values. If you want to look up the torque value, get a torque wrench. I'm a big fan of doing that too, but again, I'm just showing you what I do. And you know, if you torque your suspension enough, you get an idea of what's loose and what's not loose. But you know, finding out the torque value is never a bad thing. Okay, so now I've checked the suspension out, changed the oil filter, transmission fluid, diff fluid. Now I'm going to do the power steering fluid and the clutch fluid. Now these are fairly simple. What I use is these syringes, and if you can tell, it's marked. It's PS, power steering. That one says brake. That way I never confuse them and never F up. So this is a HVAC oil injector. I promise if I could remember who I saw online that suggested these, I would give you credit. I cannot remember when, or I've had these for years. So I apologize. Somebody turned me onto this online and I jumped on it. You can find these things on eBay and Amazon all day long for cheap. So this is power steering. So you just take the power steering cap off, stick this down in there, and pull. Be careful because power steering fluid is going to try to flow out of this thing, and as you can see, it's pretty freaking nasty. But this isn't the, you know, you're not going to flush this in one attempt completely, but if you do this, you know, every oil change after the third one, your power steering fluid is going to look fantabulous. All right. And that's all I'm going to get out of here. This little, I mean, could I really work and try to get more? Sure. But again, what I'm going to get out is minuscule. So I just call it good and put fresh fluid in there. I've found the Valvoline power steering fluid to work pretty well, and I like it. Don't overfill this. You've got it, you know, you've got level readings on the cap. There's a dipstick on the cap. Put the cap on, close it, let it sit for a second, and we're just below the full cold line. So I'm going to put this cap back on. We're going to do the brakes, and I'll check this a little. I'll give it about 5 minutes to settle in to make sure I'm still good. If we're good, we're in there. I'm sorry, I said brakes, but I meant clutch fluid. But the clutch fluid is the same as the brake fluid, and it's got its own little reservoir, and it's pretty gnarly. It's pretty nasty. And get a new rag. Again, brake. You don't want to mix brake fluid and power steering fluid. You don't want to mix almost any fluids. So, you know, again, these are dirt cheap on Amazon. And I found pulling out brake fluid and power steering fluid, they've got a life of about 3 to 5 years, depending how many, you know, of these you do. So I think they're $8. And so, you know, if you spend $9 every 2 years for this, it's pretty successful. It's pretty inexpensive. And again, you won't be able to get all of the brake fluid and watch the paint, because brake fluid is absolutely corrosive to paint. But this is when you'll take your little handy duty rag there and stuff it in there, and that way you can clean up whatever residue is in there. You don't have to do that on the power steering fluid. Again, your clutch fluid is about that. It's a simple little thing just to stuff in here and clean out. So why wouldn't you do it? And you know, just try to get all the residue, because there's gunk down in there and old brake fluid, and just want to get as clean as possible. One of my neighbors going by. All right. And again, this has a fill line on it. And brand new brake fluid. I don't know what the shelf life of open brake fluid is. Truthfully, I call it 6 months. So I'm going to open this. It's still got the cap on. I'll write on here a date. In 6 months, I'll throw this out and I'll go buy another one. Just how I roll. Like I said, I don't know what the actual life is when it comes to brake fluid. I didn't Google it. I just know at some point, being exposed to the elements, the wet boiling point changes because it, you know, absorbs moisture. So, oh, I didn't put enough in there. All right, and again, brake fluid hates paint. So, do your best not to spill any on the paint. If it gets on the paint, wipe it off as fast as humanly possible. And that's it. Power steering fluid changed, clutch fluid changed, brake fluid flushed, motor oil, engine oil filter changed, differential fluid changed, transmission fluid changed. I've got a new baseline starting point for my new car. How do I track this? I've got a really high-speed method, and I'm not kidding. I just use a sheet of paper. I was using Excel sheets and all that. Every vehicle I own has one of these, and when it gets too nasty, or I try to make sure my hands are cleaner than this to touch it, but if it gets too nasty, I'll transfer the last two I did onto a new sheet and throw that sheet away. So, yeah, we just got to get this thing down and we'll be right as rain. And again, I threw some track prep stuff in here just for those of y'all that may be interested in that. And thanks for watching Maintainer's Garage. Have a great day.